Hello, everybody. This is your host, Richard, and today we're going to talk about the Arab Spring, a political movement that led up to many turmoil happening currently in the Middle East, most predominantly in a country named Syria, which is this picture. Um, as you guys probably heard from the news, the Syrian President Bashar Assad recently fled the country of Syria and to Russia because he lost a ongoing civil war. So to address more on that, we must first investigate what the Arab Spring was like how did Arab Spring became so influential in the Middle East, and what are the aftermath of the Arab Spring. So overviewing our context today. I want to talk about the historical context as well as the resolution aftermath and the impact of the Arab Spring, and try to connect it with the rest of world history as well as talking about why it matters to us. Um, so so basically, the Arab Spring was a collection of pro-democratic protests that struck through much of North Africa and Middle East in the Islamic world. That happened back in 2010 and 2012. So back in 2010, there was as an aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, there was a major international food shortage that swept through North Africa, particularly in Tunisia, where thousands of citizens felt dissatisfied with their governing autocracy and gathered on the street demanding for change. So the president of Tunisia, Ben Ali, originally ignored their demand while trying to oppress these pro-democratic protests and demonstrations. But however, the angry mob soon quickly turned to violence, and the government was basically in a state of emergency. But that didn't took for long, because soon the revolution known as Jasmine Revolution. Jasmine is the national flower of Tunisia. Succeeded. So basically, Ben Ali was forced to flee his country after 20 years of regime. So that didn't. So the reason why Arab Spring is actually a movement is a international human rights movement, is that it didn't really get contained in Tunisia. It kind of spreaded because it inspired many others to follow across the Islamic world. So after Ben Ali's collapse, the revolutionary ideal soon made its way through social media to many young Egyptians. And as the crowd brought their emotions onto the street, Egypt is essentially in a similar situation with in proximity with Tunisia, where the economy was kind of not in a good way, and the crowd was very dissatisfied with the government. So after months of intense standoff between the Egyptian military and citizens, the escalated turmoil brought the military to reconsider its stance with the Egyptian leader, this guy, President Hosni Mubarak, Mubarak, and basically the Egyptian military thought this guy no longer worthwhile their support, so the military eventually refused to execute his further orders and eventually force him to resign. So while those two, the previous slides, are more domestic, the following two nations in that was involved in the Arab Spring is more global issue, because many international forces end up intervening. The momentum of Arab Spring essentially is carried throughout the Middle East, so that it kind of built a international sympathy to human rights issue in Islamic world, and basically following Tunisia and Egypt, the protest in Libya is no longer just like part of Libya, because Libya was also so Libya was also being intervened by like foreign military. So basically, like before all the Arab Spring, Libya was under long-term dictatorship under Muammar al-Gaddafi. This is Gaddafi when he like rose to power. He was a military officer in that used to be in like Libya, and however, by like mid of February in 2011, the unrest in Libya already escalated into like a full-scale civil war. So by that time, the international like UN and like community is already criticizing like what Gaddafi is doing within his nation, and also proposing sanctions, mostly from European and NATO countries. However, it was ultimately that the UN Council decided to like put a restricted air zone above Libya, so that like UN forces could like start military operation to like essentially neutralize pro Gaddafi forces. That is what like ultimately caused him to like to lose out of power and essentially be arrested as well as executed by the Libyan people and their resistance forces. That was like in Libya. Similar like situation happened in Syria, because Syria was also under decades long like dictatorship under the Assad family. This is old Assad, and this is his son Bashar Assad, who's the guy that recently like fled the country. So the Syrian situation is because over the reign of Assad, he kind of oppressed political criticism, seized national asset, and did a lot of things that Syrian people are not that happy about. But by the time that old Assad, which is a left picture, passed his power to like his son Bashar, Syrian people are already kind of tired of this military autocracy. So as protests and demonstration, of course, like broke out as like Arab Spring like momentum carried throughout the Middle East, constant backlash between the government and military, as government military and like civilian insurgencies marked the beginning of the Civil War. But instead of it like staying domestic, it kind of also got like high involvement and international intervention. Like a couple of major players are involved. First is Turkey. Immediately after the outbreak, since Turkey borders Syria, and Turkey as a nation is kind of interested in protecting, like trying to like keep his borders like relatively stable. So Turkey, of course, intervened through direct occupation as well as proxying military groups. But the United States is also interested because U.S. is extremely concerned after 9/11 to establish federal government to the U.S. in the Middle East, so that so the U.S. could like help eliminate terrorist activity in the Middle East, as well as proposing somewhat of a control and influence in the Middle East. Russia Russia is not that complicated, because Russia actually had a long historical tie with Assad's regime, because back in during the USSR, there was close alliance between both Assad and, believe it or not, Gaddafi. They are both connected to the Soviet Union, backed by Soviet forces. So that didn't that kind of helped Russia to immediately back. That helped convince Russia to immediately deploy Russian armed forces into Syria to help stabilize the situation for Bashar Assad, as well as it could kind of expand Russia's influence in the Middle East. So why did this happen? What's its overall picture in history? So my opinion is that the Arab Spring itself was an inevitable outcome due to the impact of a number of historical incidents. I believe like two major ones are both like the Soviet collapse, because like what I said in previous slides, Soviet Union actually backed a lot of these like socialist regimes in the Middle East to both expand his like Soviet Union's what's called influence in the Middle East, and also like create like an international like Soviet like military Soviet like influence zone. So many dictatorships in the Middle East was like backed by communist military aid, but with the collapse of the USSR, many of these Middle Eastern regimes lose its source of support, like both militarily and economically. So that kind of led to its weakened like regime over like its nation overall. But the 2008 financial crisis was also like an outbreak, was also like a reason for the Arab Spring, because the outbreak of food shortages across the Middle East, intensified like the relationship between the government and like its citizens, and also like bad economics generally like creates a lot of problems for a government, and like people are probably dissatisfied. And a similar event to this, I believe, is the 1989 like revolution in Eastern Europe, because that was like a large scale regional abolishment of multiple governing bodies, like according to the will of citizens, the will of their citizens. I think it's very similar to like the Soviet Union, like the end of the Soviet Union, and the Eastern Europe, like like Eastern Europe's like transformation of like from communist regime to capitalist. I think that's like very similar to that idea over here. Basically, like a large scale abolishment of like a well in place like governing body. So that I thought that's interesting. So why does it matter for us? Because I am a random high school student in North Carolina. Why does it matter to us? My answer is that any government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That is from famously said from Abraham Lincoln. I think it could accurately describe the situation over here, because I believe humanity's common goal is to wish for all people to live under a prosperous and equal environment. I think that's a necessity for not just us, but everybody across the world. So as a student, my influence is very limited, but I can still help through spreading this influence on like social media, like what I'm doing right now, and possibly donating some of my allowance to help relieve their struggles, like overseas, like in the Middle East. But as well, like most importantly, to feel like very grateful for like the environment that I could enjoy and live in, and also be sympathizing to like their everyday lives and how tough like they're going through. And I think overall it's like a very important issue that we're making progress, and eventually the world is gonna lead to a better future, like where everybody could enjoy like a beautiful future. So that's all I want to say, and I hope you like learn something new from my video, and I really appreciate like you like watching my video in general. Um, yeah, this is just like a recently like the things that happened in Syria just caught my attention. I was like, yeah, maybe I should like address this a little bit, but. Before next time, these are some of my bibliography. If you want to learn more, you could click on. You could like click on one of these links. I'll leave it down in the comments. But before next time, thank you everybody. I'm your host Richard, and Merry Christmas.